Welcome to the Sacred Geometry of Consciousness. For more than 33 years, your show hosts, Gregory and Gail Hogue, have been internationally known leaders in creating sacred geometric tools for expanding loving consciousness and well-being. Listen in now as they share practical applications of sacred geometry in everyday life.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We are on our journey looking at how Spirit connects with us, and today we're on step number 9, which is basically talking about the fact that we're all endowed with very unique gifts and ways of connecting to the bigger part of ourselves. And so what we often do is get caught in the trap of looking at others and seeing how they connect with Spirit, and then we think, oh, I want to channel like that person. I want to tune in the way he does or she does. And what we forget is that we are all unique, and we have very unique gifts that we can draw upon to be part of bringing Spirit into our lives and into the lives of others. So that is number one, important for you to recognize that within your heart and within your being, you need to find the unique ways that Spirit calls to you and that you feel energy coming into your life, and then nurture those aspects in your life.
It's very important to honor yourself, your own pathways, your own unique qualities, as opposed to comparing yourselves to other people. When we do comparisons, what we're doing is we're looking outside of ourselves rather than inside. And what we're talking about right now are the internal gifts. And there's no measurement of good and bad, how good, am I as good as this person, any of that kind of stuff pulls us out of that space of honoring who we are and puts us into judgment. And judgment is diametrically opposed to allowing us to receive and cultivate our unique expressions, our gifts of who we really are at that sensitive internal level of being. So if you find that there's some judgment going on, you're wondering, well, why am I not doing this as well as someone else? That is a question that gets you off track. And an opportunity then exists to get back on track and to just merely acknowledge yourself, recognize that everything that we do is a path. And as we learn, as we adventure out on that path, as we honor the gifts that we have, we cultivate them. We get better and better at what we're doing.
Sometimes you may have thoughts come in, or as we've talked about in previous programs, you'll have little key indicators, certain numbers, certain things on clocks, or certain things out the window watching a butterfly go by. And whenever you're triggered by something in your environment, go deeper, explore more. There may be ways that you see colors or see little things out of the corner of your eye. You may feel things within your body in a sense of quivering, a sense of certain spaces, like people talk about, you just didn't feel right in the pit of your stomach. And whatever you're doing that feeds that deep knowing within you that you are on a path toward spirit. Now, spirit is always about love and consciousness and unity. So when you're exploring these different avenues, as you start to get information, as you start to have things come into your life that you're exploring and testing, always make sure that it fulfills your deepest moral sense. That is, obviously not to do unto others as you would have them not do unto you. I said it backwards, but bottom line, we've heard that again and again, that we really want to be in that space of spirit, which is about unity, as I said a moment ago. And so if any message comes in that's counter to unity, that is, it's about separation, where maybe you're the special one that can hear things, or the group you're working with is special and different than other groups. It's very important to recognize if something is pulling you away from focusing on the good of all, on being part of the whole, on working for the unity of love, the love in unity. And another aspect that sometimes is a good marker is if there's any fear at all involved, or any kind of negative emotion that comes up, you know that's not of spirit. And the messages that come through are always about connection and working with joy and working with happiness and working with love. It's not to say that those things don't exist in your life, the negative emotions, but they're negative emotions to be worked on, and what I work on all the time in myself. But when I get a message from spirit, it's not got that flavor to it or that tinge of any negative emotion. Spirit is always seeing the biggest picture, which is an incredible picture of a lot of love and a lot of connection. And so, it's marvelous to be here at this time.
It certainly is. And being here is an interesting thing because our education, our experiences have acclimated us to appreciate being here more on the physical level than on those higher dimensional levels. And being here is really a combination of all of that. If you've seen any of the programs that Gregory and I have done, he often talks about how we are almost all energy. 9.9999999% of who we are is energy. That's the space. That's what sometimes people will call the void or the still point. And yet, we are educated and primed to relate to ourselves and our life from physical standpoints, getting the cues of what life is about based on our physical senses, our smell, our touch, our sight, our hearing. Those acuities have really been developed extremely well. And what is really important for us to be developing in relationship to all that, and what kind of needs more of a jump start, is those higher perceptions, those capabilities for listening deeply, for moving into the silence, for being in those places of accessing that inner knowing, that intuition, that capability of recognizing that it's very practical and normal to be able to communicate with our higher self, with soul, with spirit guides. All of that is part of what this life is about. And so in order to do that, we have to shift our energy, because when we're in our normal waking state, we're kind of in a denser realm. And that kind of keeps us more cued in to all of those perceptions that we rely on for telling us what's going on in our lives. And in order to be creative, in order to shift our lives, in order to move into a more loving and connected state, it is important to go beyond that. We want to get into those places where we're really set up to allow spirit to connect to us, to hear, to know, to feel the heart as the center of being, to listen to the breath, to recognize the signs that show up in our body or in our life that are telling us something, that are motivating us, that are supporting us to take those next steps. And so I find for myself that my practice is that in the early morning, after waking up, before my mind starts to go off in different tangents and I kind of become a little bit more concrete, I want to take that time to expand my silence, to expand my capability to listen, to meditate, to relax, to be, to feel my heart, to work internally with what I am choosing to create in my life, to get out of the head, into the heart, into that receptive, that very precious place that is a very significant part of who we are. And so the mornings are exceptionally important before we get onto the treadmill, before we start looking at our cell phones and emails and whatever else, and start transitioning to the outer world. The morning is a wonderful, wonderful space. Even in the shower, I've always loved that time when the water's coming down and the rhythm and the peacefulness, the flow just supports that creative space, that listening, that knowing, that connecting, allowing spirit to speak and be heard. And the evening time is very important as well, because that's a time when we're winding down from the day. We're moving into another dimensional relationship where we're preparing for sleep, we're preparing for dreams. And so that's the second time of the day that I really appreciate having my meditation time, to be able to go into the rest period with that sense of connection.
Sometimes when we hear about people's experiences of hearing information or seeing things, we think of it in terms of our daily talking and hearing and seeing and some of the other tastes and smells and senses we have. And yet, when you're working with spirit, those subtle experiences of connection can sometimes be like a waking sense, but it's not quite the same thing. It may not be quite as vivid. The seeing, it's a different kind of inner seeing, a different type of inner hearing. And so that again is something I bring up just so that you're not looking for something that doesn't really exist. You're looking to have something manifest in front of you and be like, this is definitely the guy in the white robes and 10 feet tall. And maybe that happens to some people, but for most of us, it is a deep inner knowing that you can tell by the feeling in your body, the joy, the lightness, the relaxation, that this is something to pursue and look at. I often do see things in a sense, and what it is, it's like all the things that I make I build them many times in my head. I'll build things and put them together, and then I'll take them apart and put them together another way, all in my head. I do it many, many times so I can understand how to create something in the physical. And so that's a way of explaining how I see things in my head. So if someone explains something to me that they heard from Spirit, right away, Spirit has a way of putting an image in my head of what it is they're talking about. And I love to have images drawn out on pieces of paper. And that's how I get information down and understand it and can remember it, is when it's written down, when I draw little drawings. And so that's my way of doing things. And we each need to watch, what is it? How did we do things? How did we do things when we were little and young and played? Sometimes when we look at how we played as a child, what we like to play with, what we like to do, that could be a way of distilling the essence of who we are in the way we can work with things today in our adult life. And so you are a whole. You've been expressing yourself for your entire life. Look at how you did it in an unfettered way when you were a child, and see what you like to do, how you like to listen to things, how you like to explore. And that can sometimes help put you on the path of what's a proper step to take in order to fulfill my role as an emissary for the light, an emissary for Spirit, to bring Spirit into the world. And let me be that voice. Let me be the one who creates. Sometimes, that is a very powerful way of getting in touch with Spirit, through drawing, through playing music, through dance, through all types of expressions of creativity. Because when you totally fall into that space of getting out of the way, of being in your center, of being in the zone, and many athletes can get into this space. This is a space of your mind is not part of it, your physical brain, that is, and your heart is open and you are just present with what is. And in that presence, you may find that you can bring Spirit more easily onto the canvas, into the soup pot, onto the treadmill, into that space where you're simply being present and creating and watching how you create.
And it's such a pleasurable experience. I know for me, when I would begin a painting, and when I used to do this was a lot of years ago. It was like, 40 some years ago. And I honestly didn't have any training in meditation. But what I just knew, because being creative and being intuitive, I realized that it was great to be able to find a way to get those distractions out of the way and just be in that raw, open space, that blank canvas, which is both terrifying and very enervating, very exciting, it's an adventure. And it was something that I love to do, to just sit and quiet myself and work with taking whatever thoughts would come in and would want to make their little comments and judgments, and just set them aside and open up my chalice for allowing that to just pour through me, my soul expression, my creative being, my connection to Spirit. And it just felt like such a high experience. I always appreciated and loved it and attempted to stay in it as long as I could. And it's like anything else, you can't stay in it forever, but I could definitely tap in and out of it. And the more that I exercise that capability, the better I would get at it. Now, something, and maybe this is because of what I learned so many years ago, what I wanted to do actually back then with my paintings and now with our work with sacred geometry and metaforms and the heart companion and the eye connect, was developing something, some space, some environment, some tool for people to work with so that they could more easily find their voice. They could more easily connect and get into that sacred creative space. And what these different tools do, and I believe that my art did it too as I was working with color and light and all of that stimulated those senses. It brings us to a place that's outside of our normal perceptions. It takes us into the higher realms, the multi-universe, the multi-dimensions of who we are. And it really does take some work to get out of the mind that wants to keep telling us how to do things or taking all the cues from the outside world rather than from the inside world. And so when people are working with the heart companion, the eye connect, when we have different geometries spinning, we're generating a frequency that helps us shift into that multi-diverse range of who we are. Let go of what we're so familiar with, what we're gripping onto sometimes that's so familiar, and instead step into that place of unknowing, that place of receptivity, that place of claiming the creative spirit, the intuitive self, that inner knowing, and that relationship with spirit that expands who we are, expands our purpose, expands our abilities, and supports us in making those transformative shifts in our life that we all want. Because life is always shifting and changing. And when we look out and we look at what's going on right now in our physical world, it's what has already been created. It's actually the old stuff. And in order to get into the new stuff, it's important to come back and internalize, find those gifts, those unique places, connect with that guidance within, that guiding system, so that we are equipped to make new pathways, to create, to allow our brains to work in different ways, to activate the pineal gland, to be opened and receptive to the greater part of who we are, the spaciousness of who we are.
It is such a delicious space to get into. It's like this is what Gail's been talking about, what I've been talking about, that creative space. When you are at that highest connection, that's where creativity comes from. Creativity doesn't come from the mundane. Creativity transcends the mundane. It transcends the everyday. So this is another clue to you finding your place in this creation, for being a voice, for being an example for spirit. And find the simplest thing to just help someone, and you may find that there is a specialness that comes out of you, that comes out of your heart, to allow you to do things that you hadn't realized you were capable of doing. the greatest works of art are attractive today to us and through all the ages, because that art touched the divine, and it touches the divine within people. And that's what we all want to experience, is that divine spark. And by being an emissary for the light, an emissary for love, an emissary for spirit and creation, you can find so many little activities during the day that you can do just for the joy of doing them, just for the joy of giving. And that's where, rather than looking for your talents, you're going to instead discover your talents. You aren't going to go trying to dig them up and test this. Well, I saw this guy do this with a pendulum, so I'm going to keep doing that. You may find that in just putting the carrots and onions into the soup, or digging up the garden, or putting that piece of wood into the right place at the right time in the house, the thing that you're building, the bird, feeder, whatever. The littlest thing can bring about that connection in you where you allow and then you discover. And so what we're really saying today is allow for those discoveries to keep unfolding in your life, and keep allowing for spirit to come into your life without trying to control it or make anything happen.
And do it with joy. It's wonderful. It's such fun and pleasure. And so we send you our blessings and love.
Blessings. Thank you.